The film 1917, directed by Sam Mendes, transports viewers to the gruesome reality of World War I, a conflict that was described as the fissure dividing the 19th century from the 20th in terms of its brutal impact and transformative effects on modern history. Known as the war to end all wars, World War I is often perceived as a largely stagnant conflict waged from entrenched positions where hundreds of thousands of young men emerged just long enough to be killed. Mendes, however, managed to achieve a breakthrough in 1917, transforming the perceived stasis of trench warfare into a relentless journey through no man's land, where the British were subject to ambush due to war. While the film was based on the director's grandfather, a World War I messenger, it encompasses the scenario of two fictional characters, Blake and Schofield. Blake and Schofield are British lance corporals who were assigned a seemingly impossible mission to deliver a message that could potentially save 1,600 men from walking into the Germans' trap. The mission's urgency and high stakes are a reflection of a real-life strategic retreat employed by the German forces, notably to the fortified Hindenburg Line, in which they lured troops into such deadly traps. As Blake and Schofield raced against time to deliver their message, not to pursue their plans to call off their attack on the Germans, they encounter various unpredictable events that were portrayed in both World War I and the film. In the film, we can see how the trenches were filled with decaying bodies, shattered homes and farms, and the gruesome outcome of combat against the Germans. Each challenge brought them face to face with both the emotional and physical toll of war, which tested their courage, resilience, and sense of duty. Blake and Schofield's mission portrays despair, loss, and solidarity that illustrated soldiers in the trenches. Although Sam Mendes' 1917 immerses viewers in the devastating realities of World War I and combines dramatic tension to show the sacrifices and bonds between the main characters, the film's one-shot style and depiction of some elements to enhance the cinematic experience sacrifices the historical accuracy, romanticizes the aspect of warfare, and overlooks the grueling and monotonous nature of trench life to increase its dramatic momentum. The film uniquely demonstrates the themes of sacrifice, loyalty, and friendship, which Blake and Schofield represented. Blake and Schofield demonstrated these themes as their mission posed a great risk to Blake's brother and highlighted Schofield's sacrifices and loyalty for his friend Blake, as well as for himself. They have also become pawns in the larger strategies of generals. It is further highlighted how these characters were not only just bound by their duty, but by their connection to their loved ones. While these themes were displayed throughout the film, it is seen how World War I soldiers' lives were pushed to their extremes, as they continuously showed endurance. Not only does this film depict their mission in World War I, but it also encapsulates its impact on the individuals who have lived through it, as well as the future generations.
Hi everyone. So today I'll be talking about the main points of the historical accuracy of the film 1917. Mainly this World War I epic was directed by Sam Mendes, which focuses on the intense journey of two soldiers and captures a lot of what the war was like. It was brutal, chaotic, and showed the human stories that emerged from it. So yeah, but I'll be explaining how accurate the film to the real events of 1917 is. So one of the main points is that the Hindenburg Line and the Operation Albrecht. I think if we focus about the central historical event of the film, the German withdrawal to the Hindenburg Line, and the operation was called Albrecht, and it began early in the 1917. So the Germans made a strategic decision to pull back and forfeited their defenses. But as they retreated, they didn't leave quietly. So they destroyed villages, laid traps, and added mines to the countryside. And yeah, just pretty much slowed down the Allied forces. So I think this film does a fantastic job of showing the aftermath of this retreat, which was pretty good. So I would say the part of the Hindenburg Line and Operation Albrecht, I would say it was pretty accurate in this film. And as for the Schofield and Blake journey through the devastated countryside, you would really get a sense of the destruction and danger left behind. I mean, this was historically accurate as well, as the Germans essentially created a desolate no man's land, a hazardous and uncertain space between them and the British troops. So the movie effectively captured this anxiety and difficulty of moving through such a landscape, giving us a glimpse of what Allied soldiers might have faced during that time. So the focus on the runners as well, I think, is another good main point to see if whether that was accurate or not. I mean, one of the most historic accurate aspects of 1917 is to focus on the runners, right? So we would see if the soldiers whose job was to carry messages across dangerous battlefields. And in an area without instant communication technology, message runners were crucial for relying orders, calling for reinforcements, or coordinating strategies. Lance Corporal Blake and Schofield, the main characters in the film, represents like real life runners. The film shows them dodging enemy fire, navigating hostile territory, and pretty much risking their lives, right, to deliver a very good message, a critical message. So it's a job that was as dangerous as it sounds, and the film really brings that danger to life. So it felt like the audience would feel that same effect, the same impact as the film did. Sam Mendes, the director, was actually inspired by stories from his grandfather, Alfred Mendes, who was a runner during World War I as well. So this was an interesting topic. And I would say the role of the runners was very, very real and pretty much accurate to the film. And it did a really good job of showing how vital and risky their work was. Another main point where I would bring up about the accuracy comparing to the film is the medical stations and the historical accuracy gaps. So while the film gets a lot right, there's some moments where it takes creative liberties. So one example in the film of the scene where we see a casualty clearing station right near the battlefront. But in reality, these medical stations were usually set up further from the front lines in more secure areas like bunkers, abandoned buildings, or behind more protected positions. This was done to protect the medical staff and the injured soldiers from incoming artillery fire or enemy attacks. However, in the film 1917, the clearing station is showing pretty close to the action. And this choice seems to have been made to keep the audience close to the main characters and the journey, while it may not be entirely realistic. So yeah, for this part, I would say it's not as accurate as in real life, but I would say, the film had different insights to it. They mainly focused on they wanted the audience to keep a close attention to the main characters and the journey, which was, I think, a good idea as well. However, I don't think it was accurate to the real life, as it was pretty far away from where it's usually be. So to conclude, pretty much 1917 does have a commendable job of balancing historical accuracy with cinematic storytelling. It pretty much portrays key aspects of World War I, such as the one that I mentioned earlier, Operation Albridge, trench warfare, and the vital role of runners. I think those are the two main ones that was pretty much accurate to real life. But obviously, of course, there's moments where historical details are it's kind of off or it's not accurate. But like the placement of the medical station or the introduction of fictional characters, I mean, these are changes that are often made, right, during the films to keep it nice and emotional. So yeah, it's not 100% accurate in every detail. However, 1917 gives us a believable and powerful depiction of one of the most brutal periods in modern warfare. And yeah, I would say it was pretty accurate. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Finn Dyke, and this is my part on the 1970 film Historical Accuracy. 1917 actually does an excellent job in showcasing examples of diverse soldiers in the front lines, such as the Sikh soldier seen in the truck about halfway through the film. Here's this quote from the true story behind the war film, It says, likewise, Sikh and Indian personnel fought across the battlefields of the Great War. More than 74,000 Indian personnel of World War I are in Commonwealth war graves. The diversity of soldiers shown in the film show this was not just a war fought by white men, and Sam Mendes, the director, does an excellent job showcasing this. However, it would have been quite unlikely to see Sikh soldiers in France or Belgium in 1917. The portrayal of weapons and uniforms brilliantly adds to the film's sense of historical authenticity. To start, the British soldiers are shown wielding the Lee Enfield, a standard rifle used for the British forces back in the day. As well, the German forces, on the other hand, are equipped with the Mauser Gewehr, illustrating the distinct differences in weaponry between the British and German armies. By showcasing these two known rifles used by each side, the film accurately reflects the tools of warfare specific to each side in World War I. This adds to the realism of the film, and portrayal is well done by Sam Mendes. The attention to detail extends to the British soldiers' khaki wool uniforms and the iconic Brodie helmets used in World War I. Equipment such as the ammunition pouches, water bottles, bayonets, and gas masks, which were essential in the trenches, are carefully shown throughout the entirety of the film. Mendes, the director, accurately displays the rank and regiment markings on uniforms to once again further the realism in the film. While not technically historically accurate, the film's one-shot technique adds to the realities that the soldiers faced with the continuous traveling and struggle in the trenches. Mendes does an excellent job with this technique, showing the audience how unexpected the front lines can be, with potential dangers at any point in time. The depiction of trench conditions in 1917 shows the harsh realities of World War I. The film carefully recreates the claustrophobic and treacherous environment within the trenches, giving us images of the narrow passageways, of the mud, and the barbed wire. These features, implemented by Mendes, are consistent with historical accounts of the trench warfare experience. Soldiers are often forced to navigate tight, muddy pathways, sometimes standing in water for hours on end. And the threat of injury from the barbed wire was ever so present. However, the trenches in the film 1917 appear a bit more clean and less muddy, rather than the harsh environment of the real-life World War trenches. The trenches in the film were often flooded with rainwater, making them even more unbearable and wretched. The film, directed by Mendes, minimized the filthy and grim conditions that soldiers endured, likely for cinematic and practical reasons, such as the ease of filming and maintaining. The overall sense of despair, danger, and the physical and mental toil it took on the soldiers is effectively communicated throughout the entirety of the film. Even if some of the finer details of the French trench conditions have been softened for the sake of the Mendes preferred narrative flow, he still does an excellent job showcasing the harsh realities of the trenches.
The directors of 1917 aimed to create an immersive cinematic experience using a one-shot technique to simulate continuous action. While this approach is groundbreaking, it introduces several distortions in the portrayal of events, the timeline, and even the representation of war itself. Let's see some key areas where these inaccuracies emerge. Firstly, the one-shot technique. According to Atnia Hidayah, the one-shot technique is a shooting method done with only one take without any pauses. While this technique allows viewers to deeply empathize with the protagonist, which in this case is Schofield, it oversimplifies the timeline of events. The film presents the journey as though it all occurs within 24 hours. However, in reality, the kind of mission depicted would have spanned several days or longer. For example, in the scene where Schofield encounters a woman and a child in Chrysalis, the continuity of the one-shot technique compresses the timeline, misleading viewers about the length and danger of such missions. This undermines the arduous challenges messengers like Schofield faced during World War I. Secondly, battlefield inaccuracies. The final scene where Schofield runs perpendicular to soldiers in combat is highly unrealistic. Historian Alexander Watson critiques this, explaining that soldiers in 1917 were instructed to advance with artillery support. Running alone across open ground, as Schofield does, would have been highly improbable. Furthermore, the idea that he remains unharmed despite the chaos is implausible. Soldiers would have been cautious about their formations and unlikely to let him pass through so recklessly. This scene, while dramatic, sacrifices accuracy for cinematic tension. Romanticized portrayal of war. The film also romanticizes war in ways that detract from its harsh realities. One example is Schofield's meeting with the woman and a child in Chrysalis. According to Jinghua, romanticism in war films creates aesthetic colors that clash with the brutal realities of the battlefield. While this artistic approach highlights hope and peace amid despair, it can overshadow the true horrors and sacrifices of war. In 1917, this romanticized moment feels out of place given the grim context of World War I. Finally, let's consider geographical inaccuracies. The river Schofield encounters between Chrysalis and Ikust is depicted as a series of rapids, complete with a dramatic waterfall. In reality, the river in this area is calm and lacks any significant features like waterfalls. According to Google Earth, there isn't even a proper river connecting Chrysalis and Ikust. It's more likely a ditch than running rapids. This embellishment was clearly included for cinematic effect, but distracts from this film's authenticity. In summary, the film 1917 provides a captivating cinematic experience through its innovative techniques, but sacrifices some historical accuracy in areas like timeline, battlefield realism, romanticized depictions, and geographical detail.
Hello everyone. Today I will be delving into the film 1917, which was made in 2019, and how it portrays World War I, especially when compared to historical sources. To do this, I'll examine primary sources like photographs from Imperial War Museum and memoirs, particularly The War the Infantry Knew, 1914 to 1919 by J.C. Tan, reviewed by Ian Beckett. These sources paint a picture of trench life that is, in some ways, quite different from the film's depiction. My goal is to explore these differences and share my thoughts on how film like 1970 shape our understanding of history. At first, examining trench life through photography, the photos from the Imperial War Museum were incredibly powerful and help us understand the true harshness of life in trenches. One of these images show Colonel Philip R. Robertson navigating a waterlogged trench in Imperial War Museum's photo number Q51569. The trench is deep in mud, and I can almost imagine the discomfort, the smell, and the sheer physical effort it would take to move through such terrain every day. This image reminds me of just how challenging the soldiers' environment was day in and day out. They weren't just fighting the enemy, but also battling these miserable conditions. By contrast, in 1917, we get a sense of hardship. The trenches appear relatively clean, and we don't get a true picture of the relentlessness of the mud and water. For me, this difference is significant because it changes the way we empathize with soldiers. Seeing them waist deep in mud conveys daily grind that shaped their physical and mental endurance. In 1970, I think the filmmakers made a conscious choice to minimize these details to maintain movies' fast-paced narrative. But in my opinion, focus on these elements would actually have strengthened the film's impact, grounding it more in the relentless reality of war instead of pushing it into a more action-oriented space. The real trenches were not just a setting, they were a part of the struggle and a constant reminder of how grueling the war was. Understanding daily life and routines in trench warfare. Another striking aspect is how these images capture the more routine side of life. For instance, there's the image of soldiers preparing a basic meal in a cramped space. The image is in Imperial War Museum's image number Q583. The setting is basic and their meal looks plain. Day to day, this was the reality. Repetitive, often inadequate food and close quarters. In 1917, the movie, there's almost no focus on these quieter movements. The soldiers are constantly on the move, which does create an intense viewing experience, but it skips over the boredom, monotony, and even camaraderie that characterized much of soldiers' life in the trenches. This omission stood out to me because it's in these quiet, unremarkable moments that soldiers truly bonded and formed the strong friendships that helped them cope with the horrors of war. Daily routines like eating, sharing cigarettes, or even telling jokes were ways to survive mentally. I believe that highlighting these small acts of connection could have given 1917 more depth. It's as if the filmmakers wanted to show only the adrenaline-filled side of war. But for me, understanding these small movements gave us a fuller picture of what trench life was really about. It's in the quieter moments that we see soldiers as people, not just as characters in a story. Now I'll just explore Dunn's memoir and its insights. J.C. Dunn's memoir, The War the Infantry Knew, reviewed by Anne Beckett, offers an incredible level of detail on the soldiers' lives. Beckett's review highlights Dunn's focus on the daily rhythms of the Second Battalion, Royal Welch Fusiliers, from the soldiers' routine to their relationship. One small but memorable detail Dunn mentioned is the soldiers gradually shifting from drinking beer to preferring coffee. It's such a minor thing, but it reflects how their priorities and habits changed as they adapted to the trench environment. In 1917, the movie's pacing and structure don't leave much room for these kind of subtleties. Personally, I think these small details add layers to our understanding of war. They remind us that war changes people in gradual ways. For instance, a simple preference shift from beer to coffee reflects how soldiers were constantly adapting. These gradual adjustments are always dramatic, but they show us the more complex reality of being at war for long periods. I find that 1917 misses out on these nuances. While the film's non-stop journey format keeps viewers on edge, it lacks emotional and psychological depth that could from seeing the soldiers' daily adjustment and evolving attitudes. Static nature of trench warfare versus 1917 cinematic tension. Dunn's memoir also gave us a sense of the static nature of trench warfare. Soldiers stayed in one place for long periods, only occasionally moving between trenches as rotations occurred. This is quite different from this intense, continuous journey we see in 1917, where the protagonist is always on the move. The real trenches didn't involve this kind of constant forward movement. Instead, soldiers were mostly confined, waiting for orders and preparing for the next attack or defense. The film's choice to depict a journey creates tension, but it sacrifices some of the realism. This cinematic choice raises interesting questions as viewers. We often expect war films or the high stakes, action driven narratives, but I think there is something powerful about showing the waiting, the anxiety of not knowing when the next attack might come, and the mental toll of feeling trapped in one place. 1970 could have explored this side of trench life to show the war's psychological effect. The reality of being stuck, unable to escape the noise, mud, and chaos would have made the film more impactful in my view. Sometimes the real horror of war isn't about continuous action, it's about the It's about the inability to escape from a harsh, confining reality. So I would just conclude the value of seeking historical context. To sum up, while 1970 is a visually powerful film that captures the horror and urgency of war, it sometimes simplifies the experience of trench life. The historical photos and memoirs like those from the Imperial War Museum at Dunstanworth Infantry New provided a fuller picture of life in the trenches. They remind us of the elements, mud, the cramped routines, and the bonds formed in shared hardship. Films like 1970 have a place; they captivate and inspire us, but as viewers, it's our responsibility to seek out the complete story. Reading memoirs or examining historical photos help us understand the real people behind these stories, people who endured not just battles, but the grind of daily life in a brutal environment. I hope this discussion as important as it is to balance the excitement of cinema with the insights of history. Understanding the full context of World War One helps us honor the experience of those who lived through it. Thank you for listening, and I hope this has inspired you to explore more about the realities of war beyond that what we see on screen. Thank you.
The film 1917 by Sam Mendes serves as a unique example of the difference between history and fiction, as it highlights the concept of the value and risks of learning about history through a modern-day film. While we can see how history films can get the audience engaged through a visual aspect, it may blur the line between historical facts and a fictional event. With films based on a historical event, it is important to note how the surge in popularity of historical fiction and the novel form in the 19th century caused historians to seek recognition of their field as a serious science. To further understand how we can learn about history from a fictitious source, it is evident how the film emphasizes the emotional reality of World War I as it uses various methods to convey the soldiers' desperations, fear, and endurance. This, however, focuses on the poetic truth of their experience and has the potential to overshadow positive truth, which is something that is crucial to history. This demonstrated by the personal and social dynamics that is shown in the film, as it highlights the emotional toll of the war. However, if specific details are altered or if various scenes are over-exaggerated, this may result in the film leading viewers to believe that they fully grasp a historical period, when in fact they've only seen a selective and simplified narrative of what has historically happened. As some things can be selectively portrayed in a different or over-dramatized way, this may allow for preconceived notions or create new misconceptions. This is significant, especially in our modern-day society, where something like visual media has the ability to become a primary source of historical knowledge. The consequence of mistaking historical fiction for factual truth is significant, as some audiences could potentially highly trust films like 1917 as an accurate representation of historical facts, and it may lead to a skewed understanding of history. While poetically it can hold a sense of truth, it can also exclude certain facts that are crucial to fully understanding a historical event such as the War of 1917. As films can demonstrate empathy, it ultimately lacks the detail and context that scholarly history can provide. This suggests how the audience can inevitably have a superficial knowledge of something if proper research has not been done.
Sir, I'm from the 8th. What the hell are you doing here? I was sent here to deliver a message. The 8th? You must know my brother. I was sent here with him. Tom's here. Where is he? It was very quick. I'm sorry. What's your name? Schofield, sir. Sorry, what? It's Schofield, sir. William Schofield. Will. Well, you need some food. Get yourself to the mess tent. If I may, I'd like to write to your mother. Tell her that Tom wasn't alone. Of course. He was a good man. Always telling funny stories. He saved my life. No, I'm glad you were with him. Thank you, Will.